Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be such a great class. I love it. Welcome to StreetEasy's Brooklyn First Time Homebuyer event. My name is Lauren Rifflin, and I head up communications at StreetEasy. First and foremost, well, one, no one wants to sit in the benches near the front. You seemed like a really good class. It's okay. That's fair. We were kind of taking bets how the benches are going to work out. Totally understandable. But thank you for sacrificing your Saturday to come and join us today. I know it's no easy feat to get out of bed early on the weekends, especially for educational purposes. But we all really appreciate it, and we hope to make it well worth your while. We have a jam-packed agenda today with hand-picked experts who live and breathe the New York City real estate market and the Brooklyn real estate market day in and day out. But before we dive in, we have a very special guest to give opening remarks, someone who has his finger on the pulse of Brooklyn in a plethora of ways. Please join me in welcoming the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams.
Thank you so much, and I was just stating that even if we would have placed the chairs in the rear and the benches in the back, we would probably have the same equation. Let me say this in my short opening. This is an amazing place we call Brooklyn. And I want to encourage you to really immerse yourself into what this borough has to offer. 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. If you allow yourself to go outside your comfort zone and explore this entire borough, you're going to experience something amazing. Any given day, you can walk into a Chinese restaurant with an Italian cook cooking a Jewish meal that he learned from a soul food friend. You can have it all right here in the borough of Brooklyn. This is a great place. Years ago, when I was a rookie police officer, I attempted to buy a house in Park Slope. And it was a gentleman that showed me several different locations that really put me on my right trajectory. I couldn't afford it. He says, Eric, imagine being at a dock where a ship sailed already and you missed that boat. You could hang out on a dock and complain about the fact that the ship left, or you can get on another ship to a new destiny and a new destination. And I did. I took the ship from Park Slope instead. I took it to Prospect Heights. Bought a condominium for $40,000. It's now worth $450,000. Then I took the ship to Bedford-Stuyvesant. Bought a brownstone 3-family. It was worth $350,000 there. Not only did I have to navigate the slick cats, but I had to navigate the big rats that ran around the street. Now that brownstone is worth $1.7 million. You can complain about the cost of living in Williamsburg. That ship has sailed. You can complain about the ship in Greenpoint. It has sailed. You can complain about the ship in Bedford-Stuyvesant. It has sailed. There's a ship in the dock in Brownsville. There's a ship in the dock to East New York. There's a ship in the dock all over Brooklyn. There is no bad real estate in Brooklyn, period. You can make a decision of deciding which ship you want to get on and build a community. When we got there, we all started block associations. We joined PTAs. We decided to make sure we created community groups and encourage people to open small restaurants. We built our communities. If you want to move into a community that's already built, already made, then you're going to pay the already price that's high. But you go there, plant your seed, start developing communities and groups, and interacting with other people who want the same things, cross-pollinating ideas, and relationships and don't live in silos, you are going to experience an amazing experience of living in a place called Brooklyn, and your families will grow and prosper for the diversity that Brooklyn has to offer. This is a great place to live. All my years in school, I realized that Galileo had it wrong, that the sun is not the center of the universe. It's Brooklyn, baby. It's Brooklyn. This is where you want to be. This is where you want to invest. This is where you want to grow your families. Two types of Americans, those who live in Brooklyn and those who wish they could. Be one of the lucky ones. Buy in Brooklyn. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't think there could have been a better way to set the tone for the rest of the program. We are so excited to talk about all things Brooklyn real estate, all things living in Brooklyn. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of what's in store for today, and then we'll get into the good stuff. But for the rest of today, what we're going to focus on is the data, the information, and the people that are crucial to surround yourselves with as you're thinking about becoming a first-time home buyer. We're going to start off with the data. Don't worry, this doesn't mean long division, times tables, square roots. You're in the clear. It's just the latest Brooklyn real estate market trends. And then we'll have presentations from a buyer's agent, a real estate attorney, a mortgage broker, and a financial assistance specialist. And then we'll wrap up with bringing all of our experts back up on stage for a Q&A. And the way that we're going to do Q&A today is we use an application called Slido. And the information is on these two boards over here and also printed in your program. But head to slido.com or download the Slido app and plug in the code BKHOME, all lowercase, all one word, and then you'll be able to submit a question at any point during the program. You can also up or downvote questions that you already see in there. That'll kind of help us gauge what questions you think are the most in demand and high priority, and we'll do our best to get to them. But that's enough from me. Let's get to the good stuff. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first presenter, StreetEasy senior economist, Grant Long.
Thank you, Lauren. I think everyone can hear me now. Thank you all for coming out this morning. We're going to go through a bunch of data here to help you become better informed going into the buying process. First step to becoming informed in the buying process, of course, classically is getting to Greenpoint at 10:15 on a Saturday morning. So good on you for making it out here this morning. So my name is Grant Long. I'm the senior economist at StreetEasy. I lead a team of data scientists and analysts that looks at all the data that comes into StreetEasy to help people like you make the best decisions around your home buying process and living in New York City. So I want to start off today with a little bit of an overview of where we are in the market right now, a little bit of context around what you see on StreetEasy when you're looking for homes. So these are just prices by boroughs. These are the median closing price for the first 3 quarters of 2018. So the stuff that's been sold so far this year in 2018, half the prices were above this, half of the prices were below this in each of these boroughs. As you can see here, Manhattan, of course, leads the way, just over $1 million for the average home sold there. But Brooklyn's not far behind, so $785,000. It's a substantial premium to the homes you'll find in Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. But of course, lots going on in Brooklyn. It's a very big borough. We split Brooklyn into 5 different submarkets here, which you'll see the variety of prices that are available in those different parts of Brooklyn listed here. So as you see here, the markets that are closer to Manhattan, obviously you're going to pay that premium, sort of like Eric was mentioning earlier. These are very well developed prices. There's a lot of people there. There's been a lot of development. You're going to pay prices that are roughly similar to Manhattan. If you look in eastern and southern Brooklyn, a little bit further away from the core job centers, you'll find stuff that's priced relatively less there. And again, these are median prices above and below. Half the homes sold were above, half the homes sold were below these prices in each of these areas. And again, these are submarkets. If you're interested in a smaller area, we have tons of data that's available on our website. I'll talk a little bit about that later if you're looking on a neighborhood basis or a sub-neighborhood basis. So these are closing prices. These are prices of homes that were sold. And one important thing to note is as you're looking around on StreetEasy, 61% of the homes that were sold in the first 3 quarters of 2018 sold for below what they were originally listed for on StreetEasy. Right? And the average discount was roughly 5% of that initial asking price of those that were sold below. So when you're looking on StreetEasy, keep in mind that you need to have representation, you need to be well informed heading into your search so that you can effectively negotiate what that appropriate final closing price should be. And again, when you're looking on StreetEasy, you're going to see homes that are posted going up, coming down. Average home in Brooklyn spent 79 days on the market in Q3 2018, right? So 2 to 3 months. Homes aren't coming up and going down overnight. It takes about 2 to 3 months to find a buyer. And again, this is in Brooklyn, and this is the time from when it was originally listed on StreetEasy to the point that things go into contract. Right? And the other thing to note here is that is going up over time. We're below the levels that we saw in the recovery from the financial crisis and the Great Recession. But we have seen that trend up a little bit over time as the market started to slow down a little bit. So I mentioned the market slowing down a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about where the market is right now. It's a really interesting time in the market. We do see a lot of signs that the dynamics in the market are shifting to favor buyers over sellers. And I'll walk through a couple numbers about what that means. First off, inventory is going up. So if you've been on StreetEasy for a while, you've been looking at homes, you may notice that there are more homes to choose from. 7,500 homes roughly were available on StreetEasy in Brooklyn. And again, these are just Brooklyn numbers in Q3 2018. And that's trended up substantially over time. That's generally a good thing for you, the home shopper, because you have more to choose from. Right, and overall what we see, and I'm going to get into a couple of other numbers, but generally we see more supply relative to demand in the market. Of the homes that are listed, more and more and more of them are having their price cuts. Right? So in any given quarter, we see roughly 15 to 20% of homes have a price cut. And that number, again, is trending up over time as more and more homes are being listed and the market's slowing down a little bit, shifting to favor you guys, the home shoppers, a little bit more, right? You have more negotiating power than you might have a year or two ago. So roughly 20% of homes right now in any given quarter will have their price cut. And if you look at this on an even tighter basis, we see a more defined trend of the number of price cuts rising. In the week after Labor Day alone this year, we had about 5% or 4% of the homes in Brooklyn had their price cut just within 1 week. Overall, I want to talk about price levels. We measure price levels using the StreetEasy price index. This is the StreetEasy price index for Brooklyn. And this is our best estimate for how the value of an individual home changes over time. Right? So this is not a median price. This is an individual home and how much we think that's appreciated in value. And a couple things to note here. The trend has been upward since 2013. That's a little bit later from the bottom of the market in the rest of the city and in the rest of the country. But since that time, we've seen prices rise pretty rapidly. Prices are up roughly 27% since January 2013. That's about 4% per year. One other thing to note here as you look at this chart, we saw the greatest increase in prices in the years immediately in the initial part of the recovery. So 2013, 2014, 2015, we saw rather rapid price growth in Brooklyn. Since then, we've seen stuff start to slow down. We're essentially flat over the last year or two. Right? So we do see the market slowing down, price appreciation slowing down. So if you're worried about missing the ship's taking a little bit longer to take off right now, and the market is slowing down. And finally, part of the reason the market's slowing down is because fewer people are buying. We've seen sales trending downward. This is the number of recorded sales in Brooklyn by quarter. And you see a lot of seasonal variance when you look at this chart, right? So a lot of people buying in the summer months, not as many people buying in the winter months. When it's colder outside, it's hard to look for homes. People in the middle of holidays, things like that. But amidst that seasonal variance, amidst that bouncing up and down, we see a downward trend. It's pretty consistent, right, over the last couple of years. A couple of reasons for this. Number one, affordability. It's hard to find a home that you can afford, right? The more prices go up, the more limited the market becomes for some of these homes. Those are out there. Affordable homes are out there. They're just becoming harder to find. And the second part is interest rates, which we'll talk a little bit about coming up. So I want to talk really quickly about making the math work for buying a home. Obviously, a high-price market Everyone's seen prices go up. Who here is partially interested in buying a home because they think they're going to make a lot of money on it? Anyone? No one's interested in making money off the value of their home. Okay, so some people are. That's good, actually, because there's a lot of reasons to own a home, not just to get rich. And it can be kind of difficult to get the math to work in your favor when you're buying, particularly depending on when you're buying. I just want to mention this really quickly. We crunched the numbers. We looked at all the homes that were bought and sold in Brooklyn since 2006. And we looked at who actually made money and who timed the market right and who didn't. And we found that the average gain, if you time the market well, so if you bought after the financial crisis in 2008 and sold in the subsequent period, the average cumulative gain on your home was 52%, which is pretty strong, right? It's about 10% a year on average of folks who bought and sold in that period. Whereas if you bought before the last crisis, at the top of the last market, so in the 2 years leading up to the financial crisis, the average cumulative gain was 20% or 21%. That's about 3% a year. In a lot of cases, you could have done better in the stock market or with other investments. Particularly when we take into account, this is the sale that people bought at and sold at, right? It doesn't take into account all the costs that go into buying and selling a home. Buying and selling both sides can easily cost 10% of the value of your home, right? So you net all that stuff out, it starts to look less attractive. So it is difficult to make money on your home. One other thing to note is these numbers are higher. These are Brooklyn numbers. These are higher than the rest of the city. And particularly when we look at different neighborhoods in Brooklyn, the different neighborhoods in the city, the top gainers all tend to be in Brooklyn, right? So Bushwick, Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, PLG, a lot of what we hear of as up-and-coming neighborhoods, attracting a lot more interest from other parts of the city, are among the top gainers. A lot of folks doubling their money there when they bought and sold in the post-crisis period. One other thing to note here is these are also neighborhoods with a lot of older housing stock, which requires a lot of investment and a lot of upkeep. And while we're showing these headline figures, and you might hear a lot about these headline figures, it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of money that goes into maintenance of homes, particularly in these areas that have a little bit of older housing stock. Wonderful places to live, can take a lot of money to keep up. So that's where we've been. I want to talk a little bit about where the market is headed. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly when the right time to buy is. That's a very personal decision as well. But I want to run through a few factors that are top of mind for me when I look at the market in Brooklyn and across the city. And three things that I think are really causing the slowdown that we see in the market, headwinds, and making this a time that's favoring buyers and sort of showing us that there could be room for prices to go down in the future or at least stay somewhat flat. Three things that are bothering us: global uncertainty. We all see the headlines when we look at the New York Times of what's going on in the world. Prices in New York City are driven by, number one, economic growth in the city and in the country and in the world. And number two, investment money flowing into New York City. Both of those things hinge on confidence in investors. And when we see these headlines, they cause people pause. Number two, higher mortgage rates. As mortgage rates increase, as the national economy continues to grow, the Fed has continued to hike rates. They will likely hike rates again in December. Most of that is priced in. You don't need to worry about timing your mortgage around that. But it is a factor that eats into affordability and does push home prices out of the reach of many folks. All things else held consistent will cause many people to pause on buying. Finally, tax reform. Very complicated subject. Really depends on your personal circumstance. But generally what we find is if your household makes, say, over $100,000, $150,000, and you previously deducted a lot of your property taxes or would have deducted property taxes, that's going away. That's going to hurt your affordability if that applies to you. So it's a thing that's on the margin, although a lot of people are talking about it. Generally what I see overall when I look at the market, it's something that I think is causing a lot of people to hit pause on buying versus renting, because there are a lot of great options to rent in Brooklyn and across the city. But that is causing a little bit of a slowdown in the market, I think, or contributing to a slowdown in the market. But I've said that, but there is a lot of cause for overall optimism in the city, and in Brooklyn in particular. And the growth that we've seen in Brooklyn prices are generated from economic growth in the city writ large. There are an enormous amount of jobs still being created here. So 800,000 private sector jobs created since 2010. Unemployment in the city just hit 4%. That's slightly above the national average, but it's a record low for New York City. So we still see those strong underlying dynamics continuing to push the housing market higher. And I think as long as those trends are in place, you're going to continue to see price growth in Brooklyn and in the city, even if we slow down for a period here for some of the reasons that I just mentioned. Again, and we see employers like Facebook, Google, Amazon continuing to invest in New York City quietly, but they're massively expanding their workforces here. Those are the same types of dynamics that have pushed prices up in places like San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, Texas, to the benefit of homeowners, right? So I see sort of a balance of factors at play here when I look at the future trajectory of prices. So with that said, that's all I have time for today. We have a ton of information available on our site. So we have a blog, research blog. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm going to be back up here with all the rest of the folks later for the Q&A. But please check out our site and hit us up with any questions. Really appreciate your time. We have a whole host of experts lined up for you who can talk in a lot more detail about some of the things I mentioned and all the details that go into the process of buying. So without further ado, I want to bring up Richard, who's going to talk a little bit about mortgages.
Hey guys, good morning. Thank you, StreetEasy. I'm excited for you. In 15 minutes, I'm going to help you guys, give you the tools that will enable you to be pre-approved so that when you do identify the property that you want to purchase, it will go smoothly. Before I start, I'm excited for you. I remember the first time I bought my home, and I just wish this experience for you. I just remember holding the key to my apartment in my hand for the first time and putting it in the door and opening the door and the exhilaration of looking into this empty apartment. So I actually did it. You guys are here because you're seriously interested in first-time home, in buying a home for the first time. And I want that for you. I think home ownership is a wonderful thing. The minute I bought my home, I met my wife and I got married. So it was a good investment. My name is Richard Barenblatt. I'm a mortgage specialist with Guardian Financial. I've been in the business for 18 years. I'm originally from Cape Town, South Africa. I've lived and worked in various countries, lived and worked in Hong Kong, in the UK, in a few other different places. The way I came to New York City, I started a business on a bicycle. And 18 years later, I'm talking to an audience about first-time home ownership and how to get a mortgage. So I've got a great story. If you're interested in reading it, look, it's called My Backstory on LinkedIn. So let's get into my presentation. As a first-time home buyer, you've got all different options of how to apply for a mortgage. And one size does not fit all. Different borrowers have different profiles. Sometimes a retail bank is a better preference. But I want to spend a little bit of time explaining the difference between a mortgage broker and a mortgage banker versus a retail banker. Let's start with the retail banker. You all have bank accounts. There's a lot to be said for going with a retail bank where you have all your accounts, you have your credit cards, you have a relationship with the bank. They also have excellent interest rates. The other option is working with an independent mortgage broker. What is an independent mortgage broker? It's one who has relationships with many different banks and they shop around for the best terms for you. Same thing with a mortgage banker. The difference is a mortgage banker does all of that for you. In addition, they're empowered to issue mortgages. So if you're looking for, this is just my project, I just want to find a mortgage, and I'm looking for someone who can do all the shopping around for me, or I've got a little bit of hair on my situation, it's not a perfect situation, maybe the mortgage broker banker is the one option to look at. If you go the route of a retail banker, they can only offer you their programs and their interest rates. I pushed the button too soon. There's one misunderstanding about working with the mortgage broker, mortgage banking model. People think, well, I only go to a mortgage banker or a mortgage broker if I've got a problem, and it's going to cost me more money. No, that's not true. I do mortgages every day. Right now, rates have gone up. Everyone's scrambling. Some of my relationships have better rates than the retail banks. Sometimes I lose business to the retail banks on rate, and sometimes I win business from them. So I wanted to just make that point clear. So here we have an analysis of the 3 different options for you. Let's talk about them quickly. Again, the mortgage broker, you go to a mortgage broker under their umbrella, they have relationships with many different lenders, they shop around for you and shop around for the lender who has the most competitive pricing. The con is, or the downside as I mentioned, is they do not have the authority to issue the loan. So they package up your loan, you send all the paperwork, they send it off to the mortgage, to the lender issues an approval, and the lender pays the mortgage broker's firm a fee. The mortgage banker does everything that the mortgage broker does, and they have the ability to approve the loan. The downside is they're not a nationwide recognized brand. It's not like a Chase or Citi or Wells Fargo that everybody knows about, and they're on every corner. And if, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking to have your relationship just with one lender, then maybe the retail bank is the way to go. You have your credit cards, your mortgage, your loans, your direct deposit. So keep all of this in mind. And then, as I said, the retail bank, it's a recognized brand. They offer all the different services. The one downside, in my opinion, of working with a retail bank, and the reason why I chose to become a mortgage banker and mortgage broker as opposed to working for a retail bank, it happens more often than I would have wished, I suppose. But I'm often getting calls from clients who have gone to a retail bank and they've been declined for a loan, and then they're scrambling to get approved. Richard, what can you do? And then there's pressure from the attorney and the realtor. Can you fix it? I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the downside, in my opinion, of a retail bank is they can only offer you their programs and their interest rates. And if something goes wrong, you need to start the process all over again, which could affect your transaction. Okay, let's talk about getting pre-approved. What I do is when I speak to a client, I make sure you're making a presentation to a lender, and I'm doing that on your behalf. I'm making sure all your paperwork is perfect. There are a couple of things, common sense things, that people don't even realize. So, first we're going to talk about credit. Check your credit today. There are many free online resources for that. The higher the credit score, the safer the risk you are for the lender, and frankly, the higher your credit score, the better chance you're going to qualify for the best interest rate. If you discover any credit issues, you have time to repair them. So how do you get a good credit score? Well, a couple of ideas. One, whatever your max limit is, let's say your max limit on your credit card is $1,000. Don't spend more than 30% on that card. Rather spread it over a number of different cards. If there are any derogatory items, you have time to fix it. But often you find that you find problems on your credit cards or simply on your credit report, which are simply wrong. So let me give you an example. A client came to me, husband and wife, buying a property, ran the credits. I said, Mike, I don't know how to tell you this, but your wife's credit score is in her 600s. He said, what? Sherry, she gets on the phone and she's mad. What do you mean Target? I've never had a Target credit card. Credit card fraud. She couldn't go on the loan. But to take her off the loan, she contacted all the bureaus and Target and getting that repaired. Guess what? Mike's income didn't qualify. Guess what? They've got a contract, has a mortgage contingency that they've got a mortgage in place in 30 days and his income doesn't work. So here comes in the value of the mortgage banker situation. I had to find him a lender that would not approve, that would qualify him without using his income. He fortunately is self-employed, did a lot of money in the bank, and there's a special program where we use his liquidity to qualify in place of income. So there's a good example of the value of a mortgage banker. But more importantly, I want to illustrate the importance of checking your credit as soon as possible. Let's talk about paperwork. When was the last time, let me start again. If you bank online, and let's say you moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, when was the last time you checked if you had updated your address? So again, this is what we're doing. We're packaging a file. We want to make sure that everything looks consistent, everything looks straightforward to an underwriter. And they say, hey, but you're buying a principal residence, but your address says that you live in California. Go online, check that your address has been updated, and just make sure all your paperwork is consistent. Let's talk about your driver's license and passport. When was the last time you checked to see how close you are to it expiring or having expired? You know how often that happens with my clients? They're scrambling. Let's talk about documentation, bank statements. Banks look back on asset statements, your bank statements, they go back 2 months. So if you're planning on getting a gift or making arrangements for a large down payment for your property, make sure that deposit is in your bank at least 3 months before you go ahead for a mortgage application. Remember, we want to get you pre-approved so that when you find a property and you want to make an offer on it, you know that you have peace of mind that it's going to go through smoothly. So, you're a first-time home buyer. You go to a bank and you get pre-approved and you feel great. I'm going to go out, I'm going to find a property. You find a condo, it just happens to be a 3-unit condo, and you go into contract and you go back to your bank and they say, guess what? I'm in contract. I'd like you to now issue a commitment letter because now it was a pre-approval. Pre-approval is based solely on you without the property address. And the bank says, you know what? We don't lend on 3-unit condos. But you pre-approved me. You told me I can get a mortgage. Sure, I told you can get a mortgage, but we didn't know what property you were going to buy. So when you apply for a mortgage, you, the individual, needs to be qualified based on your credit profile, income, assets, and credit, and the collateral. The building needs to stand on its own. There are 4 legs: income, assets, credit, and collateral. If one of those legs is weak, the chair's going to fall over. You won't be able to get it. So again, I get the phone call 30 days before closing. You're not going to believe it. The bank pre-approved me. It's not the bank's fault. It's just people are not educated. And a message I want to leave with you is when you identify a property you want to make an offer on, ask your attorney, your realtor, your mortgage broker to do their due diligence. Make sure the building is good for financing. Situations where a building would not work. If there's litigation, if it's financially not sound, if there are too many rental units, if there are less than 10 units in a building. These are the kind of things you need to speak to your mortgage broker or your retail bank and say, can you lend it? Now guess what? Getting a mortgage is a very uncertain terrain. Why am I saying that? A bank is going to say, sure, we've approved this building before. And then you go and you apply, and then the loan, the collateral documents go to a different city, and their collateral division looks at the appraisal, and they come back and say, I'm sorry, we can't give you a loan. You say, okay, now I'm stumped. You told me you had worked in this building before, that the building was approved, and today you're telling me you can't give me a mortgage. There's something called something called lender concentration. There's only so many loans a lender wants to lend in one building, even if it's a good building. They don't want to have overexposure. So, talk to your mortgage broker, talk to your lender before making an offer. And if there's one thing I can leave with you today, of everything I've said, is who you work with today is more important than ever before. Choose your team. When you tell friends that you're buying a property and say, I've got the best attorney for you, I've got the best mortgage broker. You know, everyone, I mean, we're New Yorkers. Everyone's got the best. You've got to use my guy, right? I know you're probably not going to believe me. You're probably going to say, sure, I get it, but I'm going to wing it. This is one time you don't robo-shop online for a mortgage. You're not buying an airline ticket. You're buying a home. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is your biggest investment. Choose your real estate broker, your real estate attorney, your mortgage person, even your insurance broker once you're about to go to closing. Choose your team. How do you choose your team? Do some background research. Check reviews, testimonials, go on Zillow. Check if they have a good profile on LinkedIn. Ask friends for recommendations. The real estate broker typically controls the transaction and refers a few names for you to consider. But yes, who you work with, in my opinion, is more important than ever before. In making your decision, I'm talking to you now about the mortgage broker, the retail banker. How do you make sure this person is your person? Make sure they're generous with their time, they're generous with their advice, that they're experienced, they're knowledgeable, they're well connected. Because remember, I know this is transactional, but these are good people to know. And with that, I wish you luck, and thank you for listening. Oh. And now I hand the baton over to Tyrone.
Thank you very much, Richard. How you doing? Good morning. Good morning, Brooklyn. All right. One thing. How many people here actually currently live in Brooklyn by show of hands? Also, mostly a Brooklyn crew. All right. Good morning, Brooklyn. All right. All right, my name is Tyrone McDonald, and I'm here on behalf of Neighborhood Housing Services of Brooklyn. And we are a non-for-profit housing organization, and we've been around since 1982. And there's many different organizations like us, okay, in every borough. And, you know, our goal is actually to revitalize neighborhoods. And we enable families and individuals to invest and to preserve their neighborhood and also their properties as well. All right? We have offices in East Flatbush and Canarsie. Okay? Now, as far as some of the services we do, is our mission to try to communicate that it's not just important that you're able to buy a home, but we also want to make sure that you're able to purchase a home, preserve it, and maintain it. So we do offer services as far as first-time home buying, but we also offer tenant support services. We offer landlord training. We also offer home repair loans and assistance. As a matter of fact, home repair is actually how we got started as an organization. And then later on, we actually added on first-time home buying. We also have a popular home maintenance training program, which is a do-it-yourself class, teach you how to do repairs yourself, landlord training, and so forth, okay? However, when it comes to home buying, here's our goal and here's our role in the process. Because I'm over to ask, you know, are you a real estate agent? And we're not exactly a real estate agent. I kind of pen us as we're professional handholders, okay? So we're here to walk you through the process, and we want to make sure that you're not here by yourself, all right? So as a non-for-profit organization, number one, we want to make sure that you understand the process from start to finish, you know, who's involved, terms, and so forth. We want to make sure that you understand your buying power. We want to understand that if you have any weaknesses, whether it's credit, whether it's debt, before you even go to the bank, that those issues are addressed, and we'll assist you with that. And fourthly, we want to make sure that any down payment assistance you may be eligible for, that you're thoroughly educated on the guidelines so you don't shoot yourself in the foot and disqualify yourself. And also, at the time when it comes to apply, we also help you with that as well, all right? So we're here from start to finish, all right? Some things, when it deals to other members of your home buying team, it may be redundant, but we're actually here to actually support them and also support you. As I always say, you know, the choir needs to repeat itself if the choir wants to be good enough to get on the road. So that's what we do. Okay, now as far as some of the down payment assistance programs, all right, you have Home First, Home Grant, the First Home Club, and Sony Ma with DPAL. And what is spectacular is that all of these down payment assistance programs can actually be used in conjunction with one another. You can actually couple them, all right? either all four or various combinations of them, which is actually good. So is a word to the wise, I would impart to you that whatever real estate attorney that you choose, if you're interested in any type of down payment assistance, just make sure that they're kind of familiar with the various down payment assistance programs, all right? Because that's very key, okay? All right. So the first one, which is the most popular one because, you know, the city of New York does such great advertising, and I get numerous calls about this every day, is the Home First program offered by HPD. HPD is a city agency, stands for Housing and Preservation Department. Now, it is a down payment and closing cost assistance program, all right? Now, key word is a forgivable loan of up to $40,000 or 6% of the purchase price, whichever is less. Now, forgivable loan, you know, what is that? Now, grant is a marketing term. It's a marketing term to get you through the door, okay? But a forgivable loan, I'm going to explain this a little later, is basically you have to live in the house for a certain amount of time, and I'm going to get into that. Now, $40,000. Now, actually, they just increased it because before it was 20, and they just increased it to 40, which is very good. So, let's say, for example, you're purchasing a home in central Brooklyn for, let's say, $400,000 all right? And let's say you plan to use the funds for your closing costs. So 6% of $400,000 comes out to be about roughly $24,000. So you're not going to get the $40,000, but you're going to get the $24,000, obviously. Okay, so it's whichever is less, you know, in that scenario. All right? And a HUD-certified counseling agency would submit your application. We are a HUD-certified counseling agency, and we'll help you with all that paperwork. So we actually liaise with the bank. We also liaise with the attorney as well. So we're going to package all the documents necessary. So we're going to ask you for a whole bunch of stuff. So just be prepared for that. ID, stuff on your commitment letter, information that you take the class, and so forth and so forth. All right? Okay? You must be a first-time home buyer, obvious, but just to let you know, a first-time home buyer by industry standards is someone who has not owned a home within the last 3 years. So 10 years ago, you could have had a house, a condo, unfortunately foreclosed on it, and let's say you want to get back in the market, you'll be considered a first-time home buyer now, and you'll be able to qualify for some of this assistance, just so you know. Okay, you must live in a property for 10 years, yes. Now, the aim of this program is actually to revitalize neighborhoods, and they want to discourage a lot of flipping, so you must live in a property for 10 years. All right, that's why it's called a forgivable loan, okay? Because actually, it's actually, the assistance, the forgivable loan is actually registered as being a lien on your property. So for each of the 10 years, let's say, to pick an easy number, which is easy work the math, let's say you receive $10,000 in assistance. So each year, $1,000 is actually reduced, all right, until the last year in which everything is forgiven, okay? What you can also not do, in addition to selling before the 10 years, is also you cannot refinance prior to the 10 years and cash out, okay? Because you're also going to have to pay a portion back depending on the year that you do that. So also keep mindful of that, all right? And it must be owner-occupied. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right? A key point here is you must have at least 3% of the purchase price for the down payment. Now, I always ask you if it's a down payment and closing cost assistance program, why I need some of this money, 3% down. Now, the things with the home buying process, in order to, you apply for this assistance when you're in contract. Now, in order to be in contract, all right, you make an offer and your offer is accepted, and hence the clock begins. So, what happens is that whatever your down payment is actually held by the seller's attorney. So you have to have a little skin in the game to actually initiate the process. So that's the reason why you need at least 3% down, okay? All right, you must complete home buyer education from a HUD-approved agency. That's very key because you have a lot of different organizations that may provide great home buyer education, however, they're not HUD-approved, all right? And or they're not approved on HPD's list. So we also want to make sure that they're HUD-approved and also on HPD's list, okay? And lastly, I'm going to get into the income guidelines, which I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about later on, okay? Now, here's some of the income guidelines that actually recently went up as of June of this year. So if you're in a one-person household, you can't make more than $58,450. So you can't exceed that. All right? In a two-person household, it's $66,800. Okay? Now keep in mind that let's say you have you, your spouse, and let's say you have a dependent, a child, so for example. Now, even though your spouse may not necessarily be on the mortgage, okay, keep in mind that when it comes to down payment assistance, they do take your spouse's income into consideration. So keep that in mind, okay? Okay. Now, the next grant is actually offered by the New York State Housing and Community Renewal. It's actually a state agency, and it's actually the home program, okay? Down payment and closing cost assistance, a forgivable loan up to $20,000. And actually, this is funding that we actually got from the state, which is unique to NHS. What happens with different not-for-profits, like the HPD is pretty much citywide, but different not-for-profits also apply for different funding, whether it's from foundations or whether it's from the state, and which may be unique to them, okay? Council submits application, pretty much self-explanatory. Must be a first-time home buyer. Must complete home buyer education. So it's pretty much boilerplate, all right? Same income eligibility as the prior program that we had, okay? Now, what's key with this program is, number one, it's a 1 to 4 family home, co-op condo, just like the other program. But the key is it must be located in Brooklyn. Whereas Home First, you have the luxury of purchasing in all the 5 boroughs, but with this, it's concentrated if you're purchasing in Brooklyn. Now, you can be in Staten Island, but you must be purchasing a home in Brooklyn, okay? It must be owner-occupied for 10 years. Okay. Next one is the First Home Club, all right? Now, the First Home Club is different because it's actually a matching program. It actually was formed to encourage people to save, all right? And within that program, you save within a 10 to 24-month period, $1,875, and the bank will match you 4 to 1, which comes out to be roughly $7,500. Now, keep in mind, if let's say you're a very ambitious saver, and God bless you, and you save, let's say, $2,500, all right? Now, that $2,500 you can actually use towards down payment, but keep in mind, they're only gonna match you that $1,875, okay? All right? You must take the home buyer education class prior to closing. And what is key is you must use a lending institution where the savings account is established. So there's a few banks that actually participate in the First Home Club, all right, in New York City. I think HSBC Bank, M&T, Sterling National, and a few others. Also Amalgamated Bank. So if you're saving in that bank, you must obtain your mortgage from that bank. So let's say, for example, Mr. Richard has a good product. You know what? I want to go with Richard because he has a good product here. Keep in mind that you're going to get back the money you saved in your account, but you're not going to get the matching. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Okay? And here's some of the income guidelines. It's a little bit, actually, a little bit higher than the previous program. Okay? Okay, now SONIMA actually stands for State of New York Mortgage Agency, and SONIMA is the peer or complement of Fannie Mae. Okay, so it's actually New York State's version of Fannie Mae. It's a mortgage product. What happens is that in order to increase home ownership among low to moderate owners, the state of New York chartered a corporation which actually buys mortgages from lenders who actually agree to follow certain guidelines actually put out by SONIMA, okay? But SONIMA also have a down payment assistance program as well. Must be a resident, all right, of New York State, all right? Also, you must get a SONIMA financing product, okay? Now, the amount is, the minimum you can get is $1,000. Now, the maximum is a hire of $3,000 or 3% of the purchase price up to $15,000. Okay, and cannot exceed actual down payment assistance and closing costs. Okay. All right, now here are the classes that prepare you for home ownership and life afterwards, because the counseling is key and the classes are key. And even if you are over income And once again, bless you if you're over income, okay? And you won't be able to qualify for any of the financial assistance. You know, the classes are wonderful because the classes actually go step by step on the home buying process. You know what? I'm going to have like materials outside. Feel free to take any pictures of this. We have the standard home buyer education course. We have eHome if you want to take the course online. It's up to 10 hours, and you have up to 3 months to do the course, so you can do it at your own pace. We have the fast track, which is actually an intensive version. It's a 3-hour intensive version of the 8-hour course for those who are about to close and don't have time to take the 8-hour course. And then we have landlord training. And landlord training is for individuals who are buying a like 2 to 5 unit property, and it goes over things like screening tenants, understanding the Fair Housing Act, tenant rights, owner responsibility, and so forth. Okay? So here's some. I also have resources of this as well at my table, so feel free to take a picture of some more information on the different programs. All right? And I want to thank you again. My name is Tyrone McDonald with Neighborhood Housing Services. And just want to impart to you that you're not here by yourself. And, you know, we're here to help you get from point A to point Z. And I'm going to pass the baton to Aaron. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, brother. What up, family? It's a lot of information. I'm so excited to be up here. My name's Aaron Seawood. I'm the founder of Team Carte Blanche at Compass. That's just a fancy word for a few people who joined me on my mission to make an extraordinary experience for you guys. Before we dive in, I'd love to just get an idea of who's in the room. So by a show of hands, how many of you are looking exclusively online? You haven't attended any open houses yet, you're just poking around online. Okay, don't be shy, this is helpful. How many of you have started attending open houses? Nice. By any chance, anyone submitted an offer? Nice, okay, good. So we see who's in the room, okay. So I think before we really dive in, the first thing to do is to figure out how to switch this. All right, sorry. It's just to talk about the buyer's agent. What are we? The buyer's agent represents your best interest, okay? So the seller has hired a listing agent to market the property and protect their interests. You engage an agent on your behalf to protect your interests, okay? Now, what's our role? Tyrone mentioned it. We're the quarterback of your team. We interface with your real estate attorney. We interface with the mortgage broker. We interface with the home inspector, contractor, and so on, okay? So you can just look at us as your safe place. We're your confidant. We're gonna help you craft your offer. You can cry on our shoulder. It may happen, okay? So how do we add value? You have so much information online now, okay? Starting with StreetEasy and other sources. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna synthesize that information. It's great to have a lot of data, but we're actually gonna give it context, okay? We're also gonna map the journey from beginning to end, all right? No one likes to be ambushed, and I think it's really helpful when you know exactly what's gonna happen next, okay? Do you have to have a buyer's agent? No. Do you need one? Yes, okay? You might have heard it's an open secret that Brooklyn real estate is the wild, wild west. And so it just makes sense that you want to have someone with you to go on that journey with, okay? So first things first, let's talk about the process. So Richard did a great job of breaking down mortgages. You're going to get a pre-approval, okay? That's going to let us know what we can afford, okay? That's going to inform a big part of our search. It's going to let us know what we can buy, where we can buy, okay, what type of neighborhoods. Of course, your lifestyle is also going to inform those decisions, okay? How much space you need, the level of renovation, and so on. Now, at this stage, it's really important that we identify must-haves. Okay, what are must-haves? Non-negotiables. So you have a pet that you love, you have to have a pet-friendly building. You know, you have a family, and you need to be in a certain school district. Okay, you're renting, and you don't have laundry in your building, and you've been hiking for 3 blocks, and you're like, when I buy, I absolutely have to have laundry in my building. Okay, that would be considered a must-have. On the other side, we'll have what's called a wish list, okay? And these things are interchangeable, of course, because you decide what that is. But basically, that could be not only laundry and building, I want to have a washer dryer in my unit, okay? I want to have outdoor space if I could, Okay, so those are some things that you can look at there. Now, once we have figured out kind of the parameters of our search, we're going to start viewing properties. And a lot of you are doing that online already. And that's where you get informed. You're learning about common charges and maintenance and the like. You're looking at floor plans. You know, you're like really excited to get out and see places because the bedroom looked really big and the living room is great. And then you show up, and for all of you that are already attending open houses, you know what it's like, and you're actually, okay, and that was supposed to be the bedroom, and it's really more like a closet, okay? But it's an important part of the process, okay, to go through. You're gonna start out like a flood lamp. That means you're gonna cover a lot of ground, okay? And then we're gonna narrow into a laser, all right? Laser cuts through steel, and that's when you get to your deal. Now that could take weeks, or that could take months, and that's really on you and your timeline to buy, okay? Now, we get to a point where we've done that, and we found a place that we love, so we're gonna submit an offer, okay? The first thing your buyer's agent is gonna do is gonna take the temperature, okay? They're gonna get a sense from the seller, you know, what's happening, are there offers? You know, we're gonna find out what's the motivation of the seller, okay? If it's new development, we're gonna find out, is there any flexibility on some of those, the sponsor attorney fees, or any of the other things that might be there, okay? And we're gonna research comps. Now, comparables that need to be apples to apples, and we're gonna figure out exactly to give us a guide of market value of that unit, okay, or that place. When you craft your offer, you wanna make sure that you don't bog it down with a lot of contingencies, okay? Sellers like clean deals, and so do sponsors. So of course you wanna protect yourself, and you have a mortgage contingency, but you don't need to laden the offer with a ton of contingencies, okay? One thing to think about is you may end up in a highest and best. You know, we had a great presentation about how things are slowing up, and it seems like prices are coming down, and that's all true. And I'm on the ground, and that's happening. But there are places that are the perfect intersection of price, space, renovation, and location. And those places are hot, and you may end up in a highest and best. What is that? That means the seller has called and said, wow, they've struck gold. They have a ton of you that want to buy the same place, and they're going to set a deadline of noon on Friday to have your highest and best. Now, in that scenario, you really want to think about a couple things. One is, what's your walkaway number? Okay? That means you can go to sleep at night. They were asking $680 for the apartment. You're going to offer $720, and that's it. And, you know, chips fall where they may. So you have to be prepared with that. The other thing is, let's say that you crafted a great offer, it's compelling, and you're in the running. Something to add as a potential tiebreaker is a personal letter to the owner. Now, I don't want to fool you and tell you that that is actually going to secure the apartment in of itself, but it absolutely has tugged at the heartstrings of certain owners when the offer itself was great and compelling and they wanted to make a choice. Now, it can't be a generic letter. It really should ooze emotion and really demonstrate that you're smitten with the apartment, okay? Smitten. All right. So now we found a place. We found our place. Actually, our offer got accepted. Okay, so that's a great place to be. A lot of people get excited, and we should be. But really, in Brooklyn, that just means like we can continue the conversation. Okay, so let's be clear. All right, it's not secure yet. But what we're going to do, time is really, really critical right now. Okay, no one talks about this, but time is the killer of all deals. Right? So yeah, you have this great team. But at the end of the day, when you find something you love, you do not have the luxury of lollygagging around and, okay, yeah, we're going to get an inspection and, you know, maybe by next Wednesday, and that's not going to fly, okay? And a good buyer's agent will already anticipate that we want to make an offer. They will reach out to one, or you will reach out and already have them on deck. And that can be part of your offer to say, hey, we can get an inspection done quickly, all right? So now we get the inspection. We're going to check for red flags, okay? Obvious things that would deter us from buying the property. If it's new development, we're actually going to create what's called a punch list. And a punch list is basically just a detailed list of items that have not been completed or need to be repaired. And Brooklyn is infamous for having a lot of stuff that needs to be done. Okay, let's just say that. So that's going to be very important. Now, what's going to happen at that point is we're either going to negotiate a price reduction, or there may be a credit at closing if these things aren't, you know, taken care of. And we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, contract signing. If everything's a go, the contract will have went over from the seller to your attorney. They will perform due diligence on their side. So we're on the front end with the inspection. They're on the back side checking financials, minutes, and the like to make sure everything is good. You get a green light from your inspector, you get a green light from your attorney, and now we're excited, we're going to sign the contract, okay? You're going to review the contract with your attorney, you sign first, and you're going to remit 10% deposit, okay? Now, this is where it gets tricky because you're like, I signed the contract, I'm excited, but the seller hasn't signed yet, okay? So this is when you invoke all the spirits, you do your chants, you cross your fingers, you do a dance. Seller sign, okay? Once the seller signs, you're officially in contract. This is what it feels like. So I want you to join me because this is a really powerful feeling. On the count of 3, I just want you to take a deep breath and exhale, okay? You've been listening to a lot of people, so let's just pretend it's been a home search. 1, 2, 3. Doesn't that feel good? We're in contract. Almost. Okay. The seller has signed, gratefully, and we are in contract. So now the process continues, but the anxiety that comes along with this search has at this moment kind of dissipated. We're feeling a little bit more like, okay, we're in contract. I don't have to worry about the cash offer swooping in and stealing this home, so we're good, okay? So now a couple things are going to happen simultaneously. Someone like Richard will be working on your loan process, right? An appraisal will get ordered by the bank, and you're working on that side. On my side, on the buyer agent side, on the front end, we're going to be working either on a purchase application if it's a condo, or we're going to work on the board package. And you probably heard horror stories, and they are somewhat true, that they can be this thick and very particular how they want them. And again, your buyer's agent is valuable because we're going to help you put that all together exactly the way the board wants it, okay? That gets completed. We're going to submit it to the managing agent who manages the building. They'll review it, vet it. If all is well, it gets forwarded to the board, okay? It's a co-op. There's going to be an interview to follow. We're going to prep you for that interview. I could spend 15 minutes alone on the interview, but what I will say is direct answers and don't ask questions, okay? And it's not that you shouldn't be informed, it's just that's not the time and place to do it, okay? So you don't want to be in the interview and saying, hey, is there any plans to renovate the lobby? Not a good time to do that. Or can I make some alterations to my apartment? That's not the time to do that. You should find all that out prior to. All you're doing is just letting them meet you. I'm going to be a great member of your community. And in Brooklyn, to be fair, this is where it gets a little bit more in your favor as a buyer. It's not as scary. Because typically, if they ask you for an interview, it's almost like you're approved. It's really just more like, hey, we want to welcome you to the building, okay? But just keeping in line, but I want to say it's automatic, but that's been kind of the trend, okay? So now we get a board approval, and we get to close, okay? This will be really exciting. So we're still waiting for the bank to issue the loan clearance. That's when you're officially on your way, okay? When that happens and Richard says, hey, we're cleared to close, great. Then the attorneys, the bank attorney, the seller's attorney, your attorney, this one, that one, your mom, it feels like everyone. So many people to coordinate. Of course, you coordinate with your schedule and see who's available at what time and date. Closing gets scheduled, okay? From that standpoint, we're going to schedule what's called a final walkthrough. Now, in the final walkthrough, all we're trying to accomplish is 2 things. If it's a new development, we're trying to make sure that that punch list that we created earlier was honored and that everything was completed and repaired as we had outlined. And if it's a resale, we're just trying to make sure it's in the same condition that it was last in. And so you normally have 2 or 3 times to go into the unit, maybe to take measurements or what have you. So during that time, you will have seen kind of the condition, and you just want to make sure that that matches up. And that final walkthrough typically happens at on the same day as the closing, ideally, okay? You want to be as close to the closing as possible. There's going to be a pile of papers to sign. You're probably going to get a hand cramp, but you will totally be cool with that because it's happening. Keys will get exchanged, and then that's when you celebrate, okay? Now, I came up with 8 steps to success. I'll go through a couple of them for you. No one really talks about your attitude and mindset going into this search, okay? You cannot go in pessimistic. You cannot go in fearful. It's okay to be nervous, but don't be afraid, okay? If you have a great buyer's agent with you, like I said before, where you're confidant, it can be an emotional roller coaster, but again, we manage those expectations up front and it'll flow. But it starts with you, okay? This is your search, and it's really important that you have a great attitude and your mindset is in a positive place, okay? And that you're gonna attract good things and that it's going to be positive. You're expecting it to be good, okay? Time is a killer of all deals. Too much time goes by in any section of the process, and it can fall off the rails. So it's very important that everybody works in concert, okay, and makes it happen. Your team makes your dream home come true. It is critical that you have a buyer's agent that isn't just a buyer's agent along for the ride, okay? You want an advocate. You want someone championing for you. You want the real estate attorney not to get in a pissing match with the other attorney. Everyone needs to understand what this really is about, and it's about you. This is your home search. It's your process, okay? So it's critical who you decide to have around you, okay? Commit to the process. You can't be flim-flam. It's very important that if you're gonna do it and be all in. It's okay if it's gonna take 3 months, 6 months, a year. It's totally fine as far as the timetable. But when you get in, make sure that you commit, okay? Be open-minded. Sometimes we find buyers get so fixated on a certain neighborhood or a certain type of property. I don't want to live in a co-op. I only want to buy a condo. Be open-minded. Be flexible, okay? At the end of the day, your home is out there, but you have to be open. Start out like a flood lamp and end like a laser, okay? Couple other things. Because the road is going to get a little rocky, you need to maintain a great attitude. That's critical. You know, you can't lose hope or feel. We've had buyers that we said, you know what, take a break. It's okay. Take a break. Because you're not in the headspace right now. Back it up a little bit. It's going to be fine. Let's get back on the horse and ride, okay? Know your why, and that kind of ties in. Why are you buying this home? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your family? And the last thing is focus and finish, okay? So again, I leave you. This is your process. Make sure you surround yourself with a great team. Your buyer's agent is your safe place. And I didn't even mention this before. It doesn't cost you anything. Nothing out of pocket. That's amazing. My team, specifically, 44 years of collective experience, and you can walk around with us for nothing. All right? So, wow, I did it. 15 minutes on the dot. This is great. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. And next up, Roz Quast is going to talk about legal pitfalls to avoid.
Thank you. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosalind Quast, and I'm the owner of Quast Law. We are a law firm in New York City, which specializes in transactional real estate all in around Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, all the 5 boroughs. And I myself have completed thousands of transactions in Brooklyn. So that includes representing buyers and sellers of real property, of co-ops and condos and townhomes in Brooklyn. So I actually am a homeowner in Brooklyn. I'm also a landlord in Brooklyn, so I totally understand what you're going through. It's a very exciting process. There's a lot of questions, and we get started on the legal pitfalls to avoid. So I think I press this button. Oh, great. Okay. So I'll start off with the attorney's role. So it goes without saying that your attorney must negotiate a contract to your benefit. They're going to have to make sure all contingencies are in place. Everything that's in your offer, in your deal sheet are actually reflected in the contract. But in addition to that, you should be aware that New York is a buyer beware state. What that means is you're buying the unit completely as is with all defects. So it's incumbent on you as a buyer to make your visual inspection at least a couple of times before you sign a contract. You might hire an inspector to also inspect all the systems to make sure everything is in place. But your attorney actually conducts due diligence. So the buyer's attorney always conducts due diligence, which involves a lot of things, which we're going to go into in a later slide. But just be aware that due diligence does include minutes, financials, an offering plan, and usually an attorney due diligence questionnaire. The attorney is also the point person between all the other parties. So typically, the buyer's attorney is the one who schedules the closing. They're the ones speaking, obviously, to the seller's counsel, to your broker, the mortgage broker, the bank attorney, the co-op or condo attorney, the co-op or condo management company, the title closer, every one of those parties involved. The buyer's counsel is the person responsible for putting everything together to make sure things go smoothly. And what we mean by really going smoothly is all issues should be dealt with prior to getting to the closing table. And actually, the most boring closing is the best kind of closing. It means it's the smoothest closing. All issues were handled prior to getting to the table where you exchange keys, checks, You don't actually have to be at the closing in person. You can close by power of attorney. But that is actually what is standardly known as the best kind of closing. So this, okay, great. So now that you know what my role is, or any buyer's attorney's role, you want to know what your options are. So you probably have an idea of what your options are in terms of a co-op and condo, resales. I have it set aside into different kind of categories for you so that you can kind of see your closing costs associated with both of these types of options you have. So first you have resale. So you might be looking into buying into a co-op. A co-op actually has the lowest closing cost just because in general, they make up about 70% of the market. So there's more of a supply of them. Also, they're usually a little bit older, which means it's a little bit more run down. So you actually get more for your money. In addition, co-ops are not considered real property by New York State. What that means is you're actually buying shares in a cooperative corporation, which allows you as a shareholder the right to live within the four walls of the unit that you're purchasing shares in. So this means no mortgage recording tax. Mortgage recording tax in New York State is about 1.8% of the amount that you're financing if you're financing loans under $500,000. At $500,000 and up, you're talking 1.925% of the actual loan amount. So this is a lot of money that you could be saving if you're buying a co-op. In addition, you might want to consider a condo. So a condo, on the other hand, is considered real property. You will be paying those two kinds of fees. The title insurance fee is also going to be something that you're going to have to pay in a condo. It is about $450 per $100,000 of the actual entire purchase price. So it's something that's going to be built into a condo in addition to your mortgage recording tax, and those two costs are not going to be in a co-op. Another option, which is kind of rare to find in Brooklyn, you can find it in Manhattan, also in general kind of rare, it's the condop. A condop is a co-op, so not real property, with condo rules. So you have the ability to kind of buy into something where you don't have to pay mortgage recording tax, you don't have to pay title insurance fees, but you have the flexibility of buying into something that is kind of like a condo. It's unlimited subletting, you can do renovations how you please, and it's very attractive to many buyers. The last kind of resale you can buy into is a residential 1 to 3 family home. And I limit it to 3 because beyond 3, 4 to 6, and you're actually going to be taxed as a commercial property for transfer taxes. So I limit it to 3, so we're talking brownstones, single family homes, 2-family townhomes. These are great and they're very attractive because you're not paying maintenance like you would for a co-op or condo. You're not paying anything to a board. However, you must have padding so that post-closing you can make repairs. You're responsible for the entire building. So if the roof leaks 3 months after closing and you have to replace the roof, that's $10,000 right there. If you need to do facade work, repointing the brick, changing the stucco, replacing the boiler system, replacing pipes that have burst, that's extra money you're gonna have to put aside just in case after closing. The good news is you're definitely gonna have an inspection when you buy one of these properties, and you're gonna have an idea of what might need to get fixed down the road. You might even know if it's something that's definitely gonna have to be fixed right after closing. These are your resale options. On the flip side, you have new development options, which really they're referred to as sponsor deals. So with a sponsor deal, your closing costs are typically a little bit higher because in general, sponsor deals are typically condos. So you already have your mortgage recording tax, you have your title insurance fees. On top of that, sponsors usually ask the buyers to pay their transfer taxes. Transfer taxes are almost 2%, 1.825% of the purchase price, and they're gonna ask you to pay. They might also ask you to pay their attorney's fee. They might ask you to pay for their offering plan reimbursement fee. They might ask you to pay for the resident manager's unit fee or a fee because they were able to get a tax abatement for you. The good thing about sponsor deals is in a down market, you can definitely negotiate some of these costs out. You can also negotiate in general with a sponsor. It's not set in stone, but you're starting at a higher closing cost standard in general, so it's something for you to be aware of. It might be worth it for you if you really want something completely brand new. These sponsor deals are when you're buying into a building that's just being built or just has been built. You're going to be the first homeowner in the unit, and it's very attractive for people. Also, generally speaking, sponsors are more likely to negotiate if it's a smaller building. So you see a lot of these types of small condo buildings in Brooklyn that used to be a single family home, knocked down, built into a 4-unit condo. These sponsors are more likely to negotiate with their closing costs. Okay, so what is the process? What is the process when you've decided, okay, great, I have an attorney, I know what their role is, I know what kind of building I want to buy into. So you're going to be working with someone probably like Aaron to get your offer accepted. When the offer is accepted, what happens at that point is the two brokers work together to put together all the deal terms onto something called a deal sheet. This deal sheet is drafted by the listing broker, and it's then circulated to both of the attorneys. So from deal sheet to contract, what you're really waiting for at this point is for the seller's attorney to put together a contract. It could take as quickly as half an hour, depending on how quickly the attorney works, to a couple of days if they're on the slower side. So at the same time that a deal sheet is being generated into a contract, the buyer's attorney, your attorney, should be starting to conduct the due diligence. They're going to be conducting due diligence, also negotiating the contract, and then before you actually sign into a binding transaction, your attorney is going to explain to you all of the material items you have to know about the contract of sale, as well as all the due diligence that you should know to be well informed to make sure you want to make this kind of an investment. This time period between contract to binding transaction could be 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how quickly the parties work. At the point that you decide that you do want to proceed with the transaction, you know all the risks and you know exactly what you're buying into, what's going to be required of you is for you to sign the contract first. You sign the contract first, remit a 10% down payment, typically 10%, and I say that because sometimes the sponsor might ask for more. They might ask for 15, or they might ask for 10, and then 30 days later they might ask for another 10. So you want to just be sure that you know how much they want upfront. So at the time that you send everything over to the other side, and I would do that as your buyer's attorney on your behalf, the seller's attorney then sends to their seller your signed contract. They get them to countersign. Only when they countersign and deliver a fully executed contract to your buyer's attorney with notice that they've deposited your down payment are you actually in contract in a binding transaction. So between binding transaction to closing, you have between 30 to 90 days that a closing might happen. During this time period, you're going to be working with your mortgage broker to get your commitment letter. You're going to be working with your agent to make sure that you can get your board package or waiver package in on time. And your attorney on the back end is going to make sure that everything is going smoothly. They're going to order your title report, your lien search, make sure that you're getting everything free and clear of all liens and encumbrances. So I've spoken about the due diligence process a couple of times now, and what exactly is this process? So there are 4 aspects which are very important. The first, which I'd like to talk about, is the attorney reading minutes. So when you're buying into a co-op or condo, there's going to be a board. The board is going to be meeting probably at least every year or a couple of times a year, and on a frequent basis, it would be once a month. There's going to be a secretary taking notes at this meeting. These notes are then put in a binder for review at the management company's office. And if you're buying, for instance, 5C, you want your attorney to see if there's any issues on the 5th floor, if the C-line has had leaks from the 6th floor to the 5th floor, if there's been bed bugs on the 4th floor that maybe seeped into your floor. This is not an audit, but it's information that you as a homeowner need to know to make an informed decision. So if the minutes constantly talk about repairs or capital improvements to the lobby, you know this is a big thing for the building and something that you're going to be buying into and that you should be aware of. The second thing that the attorney is going to review are the building's financials. So usually the attorney should review the last 2 years of financials to make sure that the investment you're making is in sound financial health. You want to make sure that your attorney does review to make sure that the expenditures is in line with the assets, so they're not operating at a loss at every year, and if they are, it's after depreciation. Most of the time, condos and co-ops report losses after depreciation, so they don't have to pay high income taxes. It's totally normal, and because your attorney would know that, they would tell you what's standard and what's not standard in the financial reports. In addition, an attorney should be sending out a questionnaire. Some attorneys don't send out a questionnaire, they send out an email full of questions to management. However they decide to do it, there should be a list of questions sent out to management on anything you'd want to know as a homeowner in the building. So this includes the past 3 years of maintenance increases, the past few years of assessments, if there's been bed bugs, how much is currently in reserves, how's your boiler doing, when was the roof last replaced, are all systems in working order, stuff that you'd want to know as a new owner in the building. The offering plan is the last thing that your attorney should review. It's absolutely required if you're buying into a new building, a sponsor building, and it is to some certain extent required even if it's a resale. If the sponsor is still involved in unsold shares of the building, your attorney should be reviewing the latest amendments to make sure that the sponsor is current on payments. Also, if the building is kind of new, so new within the past 5 years, the attorney should also still be reviewing the offering plan just because the sponsors usually control the board for 5 years after the first closing. That's something to be aware of. And this is a due diligence process that your attorney for a buyer should always complete. So now that you know kind of how the process works, what is something that you must know about New York? So I always tell my clients to go into closing dates with a beginner's mind because you might not be from New York, you might have purchased in Jersey or Connecticut or Pennsylvania. New York is the one state where closing dates are always on or about. So other states, whatever is in the contract is the date you have to close or else there's going to be penalties for both parties. In New York, the contract can say on or about, on or before, on, or simply just have a date. And it doesn't mean anything because automatically both parties can delay closing for an additional 30 days beyond that date, notwithstanding delays from third parties. So if your co-op delays in actually giving you an approval, it gets pushed back even more. So it's good to be realistic and set your expectations so that you can work together with your landlord or whatever living arrangement you have now to make sure it's not going to be a problem down the line. The only exception is when you have a time of the essence contract. And what that means is it's actually written into the contract. For instance, October 1st, time being of the essence. If you do not have this in the contract, no one's going to close on October 1st. The only exception for when you do see these types of things, because it's not standard in resales, is in sponsor contracts. And even then, they do give you wiggle room about a few days to a couple of weeks to up to a month. They're much more lax in Brooklyn about this as well, so it's something to be mindful of. It's just very difficult to get the exact closing date you want. And what I want to leave you with is that it's never too early to assemble your team. So if you're actually submitting an offer, some people might not realize this, but if you put an attorney's name as part of your offer to the other side and the seller's broker recognizes that attorney, or they realize that they've worked with them before, they're reputable, it makes your offer more legitimate. And it might make or break them accepting you, all other things being equal. It just makes you look like a more serious buyer. In addition, it allows you to avoid the rush before you end up having to get a contract out. So if you end up going for the first attorney that gives you a call back after an offer is accepted, you probably don't have time to properly interview them. They might be a litigator and you might have a 3-day deadline to sign a contract. 2 of those days, this litigator is going to be in court, and then where are you left with? You're left with 1 day for your attorney to review everything, and you might lose the deal. So you definitely want to do your due diligence in actually finding out what the attorney specializes in. They should specialize in residential real estate. And also, you want to make sure that they're not someone who's going to give you a deal because they're your uncle or your family friend. Usually, you do get what you pay for when it comes to those types of things. And that is it. Thank you.
Alrighty. How are we feeling? Too much information? Enough information? Hopefully not too much because we're not done yet. So now we are going to have our Q&A session. So as I mentioned earlier, and it's in your programs and on the screens, we use Slido, and it's also behind me. So go to slido.com or download the Slido app, code BKHOME, and then plug in your questions. We already have some great ones here. So let me bring up the rest of our experts, and we will get started. Oh, and important note, if for any reason your question isn't answered during this session, I'll take the one at the very end. If for any reason it isn't answered, all of our experts have tables outside. They'll be hanging around for meet and greets for about an hour, so feel free to head out there and chat with them afterwards. Their contact information is also in the program and will be included in our recap post on the StreetEasy blog. So plenty of time to get your questions answered, even if we don't go through them right now. All good? We squished in?
Yeah.
Cozy?
Yeah,
Perfect.
well, nice.
Okay, so our first one, I'm actually going to lob to you, Richard. Can you talk about how mortgage lending works with student loans and other types of debt?
Sure. So your credit report will reflect what your debt is in addition to what your housing payment will be. So lenders look at your debt to income ratio. In general terms, your debt to income ratio should not exceed 40%, maybe up to 45% of your income. So if you make $10,000 a month in qualifying income, let's say you make a salary of $10,000 a month, all your debts, including your your new housing expense, should not exceed $4,000 to $4,500. Now that will include student loans, car loans. The lenders only look at the minimum monthly payment on a student loan, for example, or on an installment loan, anything that shows up on your credit report. Now, let's say student loans, let's say they're in deferment. It comes up on your credit report. If it's on deferment, you're not paying it, correct? But if it's on your credit report, the lending guidelines say we still need to factor that in. So you would provide your student loan contract, and in that contract, one of the terms will state what your minimum monthly payment would be, and that would be included in your debt to income ratio.
Great. And Tyrone, is that is there anything different in your world when it comes to student loans? Anything in particular that people have to watch out for if they're looking at any of the financial assistance programs you talked to us about?
Well, in order to get a lot of the financial assistance programs, you must, because everything's all related, so you must be mortgage ready. And because a lot of times people tend to focus on the grant, but not necessarily realize, yes, you must be mortgage ready, and that also includes that debt to income ratio. So that's very key. It's very true what he just said. Student loans, credit cards, and other debt as well. So it's definitely considered.
I'd like to add one point,
Sure.
sorry. Now, if you do have student loans, but you can prove that someone else has been paying them for at least the last 12 months, for example, a parent has been paying your student loans, then we can exclude that debt. It's important you know that.
Great. Next up, Roz, I think this one's best for you, and you kind of covered it in your slide about a sponsor sale versus resales. Yeah. But the question is, what are the pros and cons of buying a new apartment versus an apartment in an older building?
Okay, so if you're buying in a sponsor deal, you're definitely going to be taking a little bit of a risk because depending on if it's been built up already, you haven't really seen the unit. You might have seen a model home, you haven't really seen the actual unit itself. And so there's a risk that it's not going to be completed on time. It's a risk that they're going to change the fixtures because the standard is they don't have to have the exact same fixtures that you think that they have to have, and it is advertised. It has to just be of equal or better quality. So it could be a completely different brand, so you're kind of going into a blind as to what you might be taking. That said, a lot of sponsors make every effort to match what they told you because their reputation is on the line. They want to make sure that they make you happy and that you might tell people to buy in the building. So that's one of the risks you take when you do buy in a sponsor new development. And if you're buying in an older building, it's very established. You know that lenders are going to lend in the building. You know who's pre-approved in the building. And so that gives you a leg up in starting your application process with your mortgage. You also already know for sure that they're going to have those appliances because they're actually in the unit.
Great. I'm going to keep you on the hook. I have one more. What are the dangers of buying a ground level unit?
Oh, man. Okay. And I know that's from personal experience because I've lived in ground units, but vermin, I mean, obviously, when you're in New York City and Brooklyn, there are rats and roaches everywhere. You just need to make sure that when you buy in a building that's on a ground level, that the building does a good job with having an exterminator on contract, that they actually do exterminate on a regular basis, that they make every effort to make sure that garbage is encased in garbage cans and has a specific area of the building that people actually follow the rules. So that's really the biggest thing. Safety is always going to be a concern too, but really that's something that you're going to find out when you review minutes, if there's been like police reports going on or any kind of break-in, or most of the time these buildings are going to have cameras too. So the ground floor security is probably not going to be too big of an issue, but really it's going to be vermin that's the biggest thing for the ground level.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And there was actually one thing that we talked about in kind of one of our prep convos, and this applies if you're buying a building that has more than one unit, but it does have a ground floor unit.
Yes.
So maybe just touch on if somebody wants the ground floor to be occupied and rented out.
So if you're buying like a ground floor and it kind of has like a basement, and maybe it's advertised as a duplex, right, that you can rent out the basement, you really want to make sure that the windows are considered above grade. And what that means is that they're at least 50% at ground level or above ground level to be really considered a legal residence. So you don't want to be violating any kinds of housing rules, but typically those units are not available for occupancy unless that's the case. So if there is a kitchen, full bath, that's usually illegal. And if you're financing, it's going to be really difficult to bypass the appraiser if they see that and they see that it's below grade. You can have a bathroom. It should be a 2-piece bathroom, not a 3-piece bathroom. What that means is you get to have a sink, you get to have a toilet. You should not have the third piece, which is the shower or the bath. And that goes, same thing with the kitchen. The entire basement space should really be considered a recreation room. There should be no sign that someone's resided in there in terms of sleeping. There should be no beds in that area. So you just want to make sure that if you really are considering one of these purchases, that you talk to an architect. They can determine if it's above grade or below grade.
And is that something that someone would bring with them during the inspection?
Yes,
or?
You should probably bring someone like that during the inspection. It could cost some money. Just pay them a couple of $100s just for a visit. Just so you have peace of mind before you make an offer, because maybe you only want to buy that place if you can live in that basement too, and that you want to make sure that it's actually legal.
Great.
Yeah, and also to add to the point is also in the basement apartment, it also must be at least 8 feet high as well. So keep that in mind. You also have to have 2 points of egress. Keep that in mind as well.
Do we all know what that word
Egress
means?
meaning 2 entrances.
Huh?
Excuse me. The
There we
Latin.
go.
Yeah.
Real estate jargon. It's another perk to this session. And here's another piece of real estate jargon that I actually don't even know. And you guys, this one will be, I'm going to toss this one up. Lease conclusions and home purchase timing don't seem to align well. What are tips on leaving a lease early when buying a home?
I can speak to that. So we've had to do that for some of our clients. They don't always line up. And there's a site called leasebreak.com. That's a good resource where you're able to kind of get your unit up. And also your buyer's agent will really be a good resource in actually listing your apartment. Obviously, there's going to be some rules and depending on your building, but we can help facilitate getting that. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to really break the lease and incur fees or what have you. So being able to use your team, be it a site that we could recommend or one of us to actually aid in getting that leased out would be helpful.
Great. And Erin, I'm going to toss this one to you too. So you mentioned having a buyer's agent is free. We all love free things, but that doesn't mean that everyone on your team doesn't get paid. So the question is, how do all the people on my team get paid throughout the process? So how would a buyer's agent get their share of the deal?
Okay, so yes, we are not working for free. Okay? We are very valuable, but it's no direct out-of-pocket costs. Okay, so when the seller decides to list their apartment, they agree to a commission with the listing agent, and we are a co-broke town, and so we will split 50-50 that said commission with the listing agent. Do you want me to talk about how each person? They probably would talk about how they get paid, right? Although I could talk about the attorney, because we help you assemble your team a lot of times. It's typically a flat fee, and so it can range, I don't know, I've seen as low as $1,500 all the way up to $3,000 or $5,000 or more, but typically there's a range. It's a flat fee where the attorney gets paid. They normally will require a contingency, and maybe it's $1,000 just to make sure that you're serious and they can move forward, and then they'll get the balance at closing. Fees, I imagine, on the mortgage side, you get on the loan, correct?
Sure. So the lender pays my fee. The process does require various steps. There's an application fee, an underwriting fee, processing fee. The majority of those fees are paid at closing. An application fee would be paid at time of applying for the financing.
Great. Okay, and we have a data clarification for you, Grant.
All right.
So, is it correct, or what you said accurate? If someone earns more than $150,000 per year, they can no longer, no mortgage interest is deductible.
That was not referring to mortgage interest. Mortgage interest deductions haven't changed all that much. I believe the number's gone from $1 million to $750,000. So depending on what type of home you're looking at, that might affect you. I think the bigger thing that's driving the market right now is the ability to deduct your property taxes from your federal taxable income. So, so before, the full amount of your state and local taxes, that's income taxes, and the taxes that you'll pay on your new home, would have been deductible. Now only $10,000 is for a lot of folks who make above $150,000. And again, that's a number that's really going to depend on your circumstance, particularly if you're married or not. That number is really, I think, the biggest thing that's driving the market right now, because that it is going to add to a couple $1,000s a year potentially that you might not be able to deduct.
Great. Okay, back to financing. So this might be something for Roz and Richard, but is it wise to put down a deposit on a condo building that won't be completed for another 2 years? Are there any pitfalls there to watch out for?
So one of the pitfalls is they think it's 2 years, but it might actually be longer than 2 years. Most sponsors do not actually complete their project within the time period they actually say they will, and they do have up to an additional year to complete the project. So then you might be talking about 3 years. I mean, if you are unwilling to take the risk of what might happen in the future, and you're cash poor and you don't want to just give your 10% down payment just that easily, that might be a concern for you. But if the building is great, it's reputable, you're going with a great sponsor, it's selling like hotcakes, this is something that you're willing to take the risk for, and you also already have a lease that can go on indefinitely for a few years, that's something to consider.
So I'd like to add, the appeal of buying in a new condo and signing a contract early is that you may be getting an entry price, a discounted purchase price. So that's one motivation for putting the initial deposits. From a lender's standpoint, these developers often have a marketing team, which is a real estate company who has assembled a few different lenders who have pre-approved the building. So essentially those lenders will guarantee the borrower that they will be able to finance in that building. The issue comes up is if someone is self-employed or someone is a foreign national and they need to work with a unique mortgage program, which the lenders who have pre-approved the building don't offer. So from my point of view, it's impossible for me as a mortgage broker or mortgage banker who has not pre-approved the building to promise somebody that I can lend in that building. Why? They may be perfectly well qualified, but if the building doesn't qualify, meaning if the project is not a success, and this is another reason, which to your point is, go with a reputable developer. If the development is not successful, if they haven't sold a huge amount of units, if the developer still holds on to a lot of the units, lenders will not be inclined or not be willing to lend. They require at least 50% of the units to be in contract.
Okay, and now we are going to jump to concessions. What kinds of concessions can you request when purchasing in a new condo building in Brooklyn? Aaron, maybe something for you?
Sure. So as we learned that we definitely are in more of a buyer's market, so that's good. And so there's definitely some concessions to be had. It is case by case and building by building, but some of the things that you could look to ask for would be the sponsor to pay for their own attorney fees. A lot of times in a hot seller's market, you're looking to pay not only your own transfer taxes, but the transfer taxes of the sponsor. and their attorney fees, so you could negotiate that. You might also be able to negotiate some of the real estate taxes for a period of time, again, depending how desperate they are to sell units. And I'd probably say the last thing might even be, and this is probably more rare or only really in a big building, would be common charges.
And Grant, I know we've done some recent concession research. Is there anything top of mind that might be worth sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times if you're looking through StreetEasy, you'll actually see people advertising different concessions that they're willing to make, whether it's paying sponsor fees or even the taxes, as Aaron mentioned. A lot of that will be actually in listing descriptions. If you're looking around, you'll see that stuff online. And we're seeing that more and more as the market gets a little bit weaker, particularly for the new development. We still have a lot of new development coming online in Brooklyn, so I think that trend's going to be around for quite some time to come. One thing to note there, too, is a lot of these developers will be eager to negotiate on things that aren't price. There's a whole accounting around it. They'd rather have the expense items than actually mark down the prices that are made. Concessions are easier to take away when the market heats back up, but they want to have those high selling prices listed on StreetEasy for the people who come behind you.
Great. Back to you, Roz. Legal due diligence. Can you elaborate on the type of line items? I lost it. The type of line items that a broker should ask you to look for, or the ones that you focus on the most?
Okay, so we always want to look at the operating costs on a year-to-year basis. So what is your building spending money on? Is it spending money on a ton of repairs? Because that's indicative of what's going on in the building. Maybe the building is older and it needs those repairs. It also is going to show line items of assessments, because assessments come in as income in addition to common charges and maintenance. So maybe 1 year, suddenly the building's doing much better than the next year. You're going to see why, because they assessed everyone, which means you as homeowner are paying for that assessment. There might be line items such as, actually, I saw this recently, there was a building-wide gas leak, and there was a line item on this repair. It wasn't even in the minutes, and that was the only way I found out about this gas leak that happened a year ago. And they spent a ton of money, and they completely drained their reserve fund based on this one gas leak. There's also going to be a very important section in the financials called notes, and an attorney must read these notes because they tell you actually how many units are in the building, how many shares, how they calculate their taxes. If there's litigation going on in the building, it's going to be in these notes. And there's going to be one-off items for whatever kind of fees that they're getting in terms of flip taxes, because flip taxes are usually charged onto a seller for the privilege of selling the building. The building wants to make some money, and so they'll charge this to a seller and take it in as income as well. So I kind of want to make a note of that to see how much turnaround is going on in the building, how much they're making off of these flip taxes. And so that's really informative. Actually, I think financials are more informative than the minutes even because of that.
And we have a question about LLCs that's gotten upvoted by quite a few people. The pros and cons to setting up an LLC to buy versus buying as an individual. This is, let's get some buzz in the papers. Is that something you can speak to?
Sure. So Fannie Mae does not allow title to be held in an LLC. So for mortgages up to $453,000, or for a high balance loan of just under $580,000, these are Fannie Mae loans. So here again comes in the value of, are you going to a retail bank, or are you going to a mortgage broker banker? There are federal savings banks. There are federal credit unions who do allow title to be held in an LLC or an entity. And especially if you're purchasing an investment property, it's the way to go for the liability. So there are lenders out there who will allow title to be held in an entity, but you just need to know where to go.
Great. And Tyrone, this next question is about down payments.
Mm-hmm.
There's some frustrated people out in the audience.
Understandable.
About having to save enough for a down payment. So you talked about a lot of programs today. The question is, what are some hacks to work around large down payment requirements, low down payment properties, et cetera?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, the First Home Club is actually a good incentive because actually that program was actually founded to actually encourage saving for a down payment. So, excuse me, as I said earlier, you save $1,875 within a 10 to 24 month period, and they do match you. So that's basically one good way to try to encourage you to save. So yeah.
Great. There was one question on here. So want to make sure this myth is busted. Doesn't checking your credit deduct credit points?
That's a great question. When you're shopping around for a mortgage, the model that is used to determine one's credit score is aware that you are shopping around for a mortgage, and you're allowed to do that. And as a result, the inquiries will show up, but from an underwriter's point of view, they'll see that within a 30 or 45-day period, you've been shopping around for a mortgage, and it may drop your credit score very, very slightly, just a few points, but nothing significant to worry about.
Great. And we have a question about it being a buyer's market. I'll start with you on this one, Aaron. How often do you see buyers bid above the ask price? And in your view, what is a reasonable starting bid if they want to go below?
Okay. We are not seeing a lot of buyers bid above. I think naturally people don't want to negotiate against themselves, and so you always want to kind of start under. Like I'd mentioned in that one point, even though we are kind of on a buyer's market, I wanted to have my presentation in the point where you might hit a highest and best, so you'd have a tip there. But typically, no, we're not finding that. Even when we're on the listing side, for example, we had an apartment for $700,000 and someone offered $650,000. Okay, and that's where they want to start the conversation. So typically, around 5%, I would think is a fair starting point. But we are, telling a lot of people that, listen, it's not insulting. It's just where you want to start the conversation. Where someone has listed the property, that's not necessarily what it's worth. It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it. That's the real answer. So in different markets, which are fluid, you're going to find that change dramatically. So no, you should not feel bad. Now, I will say if there's a rare case where one of my teammates, Sorrel, got her buyer into a place before anyone else, right? So it was persistent. They weren't showing yet, got the buyer into the place. And in that instance, you may want to bid at the ask, right? Because they haven't did an open house yet. They haven't done anything yet. So in that instance, if you get the privilege of going early, then you may want to be at ask or something or a little bit better to say, look, I want to shut it down. I love this. There's no need for you to move forward with this, and we'll do it. But more than likely, that's not going to be the case. And so in that instance, feel okay with bidding lower. But, wherever you want to start, you have to have a really good buyer's agent the lower you want to go. Because then they're going to have to do a lot of work with the listing agent to say, listen, don't be insulted, convey this to your seller, our buyer's very serious, maybe it's cultural, maybe there's another reason they want to start so low, and then you come up. But I think within 5% is fair.
And we've definitely talked a lot about budgets today. A really important part of that is to make sure you're thinking about closing costs. So Roz, tell me if this is a right question for you, but how much should I budget for closing costs on a condo versus a co-op?
Okay, so a co-op, your closing costs are actually very low. So you're not going to have to pay the mortgage recording tax. You're not going to have to pay title insurance fees. What you're going to have to pay is probably a co-op attorney or co-op managing agent fee, because at closing, they're the ones heading the table, making copies. They usually charge anywhere from $500 to $1,000. You have to pay your attorney. Obviously, you have to pay the bank attorney. The bank attorney does get paid. They do get paid less than your buyer's attorney. Depending on the bank, there's a limit between $850 to $1,100 for the bank attorney. You're going to have to pay the next month's maintenance in a co-op, so just be prepared that they're going to ask this of you at the closing table. You might have to pay some minor, like a few $100 recognition fee costs, any kind of additional costs that the co-op's going to charge you just because you're financing. Everyone wants to make a little money off of you because you're financing, and they might charge you $450 because you're financing, and they have to prepare some sort of agreements between, they have to sign off on agreements between you and the bank. On the flip side, on a condo, you're going to be paying all those title fees. You're going to be paying the mortgage recording tax. You're going to be paying your attorneys. Also going to be paying the condo or co-op managing agent. Usually, they don't charge as much, if any, because they're not going to be heading the table and making copies for you. The closing in a condo usually takes place at your seller's attorney's office or at the bank attorney's office. So that's one fee that's less than a co-op usually. But again, with both of those, you're going to have to pay move-in deposits, move-in fees, application fees. If fees are a concern for you, you're going to want to ask upfront from your broker to give you the application for the co-op and condo to see what kind of fees they're going to ask of you, because each co-op and condo is different. Some might ask for more fees than the other. Usually there is no financing fee in a condo, but you would have that in a co-op. In addition, a sponsor condo is going to have even more fees that I spoke about. You're going to have to pay probably or negotiate down a little bit the transfer taxes. Anything at $1 million and up in general, the buyer has to pay something called a mansion tax. So that's something to keep in mind. 1% of the purchase price on anything at $1 million and up in New York State is subject to a mansion tax. And then you'd have to negotiate the attorney's fee for the sponsor and all the other fees, resident manager fee. Usually, if you're buying in a smaller building in Brooklyn, there's not going to be a supers unit, because if you have 4 units in a building, they're not going to spend one whole unit on a super. So that's a fee that you probably don't have to worry about. You're going to have to pay 2 months of common charges as a working capital fund contribution to any kind of new construction project, because you're buying into a new building. They don't have reserves. They don't have financials published yet. So they want to jumpstart their reserve fund with this kind of money. And you're going to probably have to pay in advance for real estate taxes. If the tax lots haven't been divided yet, they might ask you to pay for the whole year's real estate taxes. And generally speaking, if you close within 60 days of the end of a fiscal time period, so it's quarterly, the bank is going to ask you to pay for the next quarter's real estate taxes. So if real estate taxes are high, it's something to make note of. It ends up adding up.
And that is why you need a real estate attorney, so you don't have to remember all of that.
That's correct.
There's a lot. We thought that was a simple question. Closing costs, condo co-op, not simple. That's why you need a real estate attorney as part of your team.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Do you guys want to hear a secret? Obviously you do. So there's a way of actually saving a buyer on their mortgage recording tax. It's something called a purchase assignment. Very few people do this. Occasionally I'm successful. So there's so many, I'm not going to get into the legal aspects of it because that's a different conversation. But when I'm speaking to my clients and they're buying, I always like to ask them, does the seller have a big mortgage? Because keep in mind, the mortgage recording tax in round numbers is 2%. Just it's 1.8 to 1.925, round numbers call it. So if you're borrowing $500,000, you're paying in round numbers around $9,000 on a $500,000 mortgage. But if the seller has a mortgage, and there's so many online tools that you can figure out who the seller is, how much they owe, and if their lender is willing to agree to a purchase assignment, and if your new lender that you're going to also agrees to it, you can essentially avoid paying that tax. Now, it gets into a negotiation, and it's a long story, and you can call me and I'll talk to you how it works, but essentially, the seller's going to want to get something out of it. If you're saving $9,000, I want a piece of it. And the bottom line is, if your attorneys both agree to it, the seller and the buyer's attorneys agree to it, if both banks are open to it, why not? Try save yourself a few $1,000s. Some banks are not willing to grant a purchase assignment. Some banks are not willing to accept a purchase assignment. Having said that, I have saved my clients thousands of dollars, but it is a process most people are unaware of it, and it's called a purchase assignment. It only really makes sense if there's a decent sized mortgage, a $400,000 or $500,000 mortgage outstanding, and your mortgage will be at least that amount.
Great. I'm going to do one more question because there's actually a couple on here that tie together. And it's about how long it takes to close on a home, which can also, we can kind of think of that backwards and say, when do I need to start getting things together if I am thinking about buying a home. So how long does it take to buy a home, and what are the differences in closing times for co-ops and condos? And someone may say it's case by case, but Roz, Erin, anyone want to jump in on that?
So generally speaking, if you're financing, the contract close date is going to be on or about 60 days from the date that you're entering into contract. So
On or about.
on or about, remember what I said before about on or about, add another 30 days, you're talking about 3 months from the moment that you sign that contract. And there's obviously factors that can speed this up or delay it. If you don't want to have a mortgage and you want to do an all-cash purchase, very rare, it's going to be moved up to maybe on or about 30 days, which means on or about 30 to 60 days. Also, co-ops just take much longer. You know, the people who are sitting on the board who are approving you are people like you and me, so most of them are gone in the summer, or they are gone for the holidays. So if they meet on a once-a-month basis and you just missed that meeting to submit your board application, you're going to be rolled into the next month, which already delays your closing one whole month. So you want to make sure that you work with your broker to find out, does this board meet on a monthly basis, once a month, or on a rolling basis? If they meet on a rolling basis, you're going to get looked at almost right away. So it really depends on the building, how they operate. But because of that, a co-op is going to be just a little bit longer than a condo.
Anything else anyone wanted to add? No? Great. So there are definitely questions on here that we did not get to. But like I said before, all of our experts here are going to be out in the atrium. So please feel free to go and chat with them. Their contact information is also in the program. I'll have you guys stay seated for just a second and let you guys go set up at your tables. But round of applause for all of our experts. Thank you. All right. So a couple of final announcements, which is all of the tips and resources. They do not end here or even out there. StreetEasy blog, one block over, is chock full of more tips and articles. And of course, we're going to have a recap with a video of this event. If you loved it so much, you want to watch it again, you totally can. Also, if you have some extra time after today, there's a map, a fun map included in your program that highlights some local spots around Greenpoint. Grab a bite to eat, get to know the neighborhood if you don't know it already. Definitely want you to discover a little bit more about what's around here. And then we're also going to send out a survey probably next week. Would love to get your feedback on today's event, how we can make it better for you moving forward, likes, dislikes, all of that good stuff. Thanks again to our experts, Eric Adams, ADO, and all of you guys for coming out here on Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks.